When I traveled here and there, the SDGs were popping up everywhere. And this was when I started studying in 2012, it wasn't the case. So when we talked about sustainability analysis, it was really a complex system that wasn't really framed holistically. And then in the course of the time, the SDGs for the first time were a blueprint to really put things together and also to communicate the sustainability at diverse levels. And maybe you recognize a few things of the pictures I have presented. That also SDG awareness and SDG marketing plays actually a huge role besides in science. So it's kind of communicated for the first time to different stakeholders, to policies as an educational tool at diverse levels, and it makes it easier to grasp kind of the framework of sustainability, which is really nice. And we obviously want to try to tackle this from a more scientific perspective. But just to show you that there are different kind of ways you can approach this kind of topic. So steps in quantitative research that you might want to. So I see again that my slides now. Steps you want to take in quantitative research. Well, obviously, with every research, first you need to identify some research questions that you're reviewing in the literature by finding research gaps, and then that research gaps you want to kind of address, obviously. So then you define your system and your research design, and you start collecting data and pre-processing the data. And based on the data you have, obviously, you need to conduct a statistical analysis, which is based on the data you have and which you adopt to kind of answer, obviously, your research question. Then you need to verify, validate, and do a sensitivity analysis of your results. You evaluate those, and you try to convey your findings. What I want to talk about today is I want to talk about data. I want to talk about methods. And I want to give you, in all those kind of, or a few examples of methods, I want to give you scientific references where people used this method in the SDG context. And obviously, to do all this, you need software tools. You have different options. So we are working quite with R, the programming language. You can use Python. You can also use a spreadsheet, Excel kind of approach. It really depends. So what type of data do exist out there? Well, we have qualitative data and we have quantitative data. Qualitative data is like non-numerical data. It could be binary, it could be nominal, it could be ordinal. So give you an example of an SDG indicator that is binary is, for example, whether a certain policy is applied in the country, and then you have yes or no, that's it. It could also be that you have something like a Likert scale of agreeing to disagreeing, or like in an ordinal scale of seeing like, well, it's partially applied, it's applied, or something like that. And then you have all these indicators that are quantitative, so numerical data. So it could have been a discrete, it could be continuous, could be geospatial data, it could be time series data. And then for the time series data, it's either stationary or non-stationary. And all these kind of different data types really define also what sometimes statistical methods you can apply, because statistical methods has certain assumptions about your data that you need to be aware of. So basically, stationary data is defined that there's no trend or seasonality in the data, and that if you have non-stationary data, it means that you can't really have a mean variance or autocorrelation over the time series. So also then there is often the terms of metadata. So what is metadata? Well, actually, it's, all the additional information out there about your data, which could be in different format. It could be describing the structure of your data. It could be describing the author, the relations, and all these kind of things about the original data you have. I put you a few examples here where you can try to identify from A to I, what is actually stationary data and what is not stationary data. And I guess it's more like for you self-study. And if you want to see the results, please go on the citation I have put there. But for the course of this time, it's more like a self-study exercise if you want to do that. But let's talk more about the global indicator framework for the Sustainable Development Goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda. So Prajal has introduced you already to a few things, I guess. So you are already familiar with the basic kind of structure. What you have is, obviously, you have the 17 goals, you have 169 targets, and you have 241 indicators. And these targets and indicators are not equally spread across the goals, where you can see that SDG 3 has the most targets and indicators, and SDG 7, which is the light yellow next to SDG 3, has the least ones. And this sometimes also affects your quantitative analysis, which you need to be aware of. So further, you have for all of the indicators, as they're displayed with a 241, they are kind of descriptive and still, in some cases, multidimensional. This means that you have actually at the ground level certain sub-indicators, and these sub-indicators are then still disaggregated, which means into, for example, demographic or non-demographic factors. And I've given you here an example of SDG 6. And SDG 6 is about clean water and sanitation. And then, I don't know if you can see it clearly, you have different data series for the indicator 6.2.1, namely 3. This means you have for this defined indicator 3 sub-indicators. And what are these 3 sub-indicators? Well, for one, it's the proportion of population with basic hand washing facilities. And then it's about safe access to these hand washing facilities, and it's about open defecation. So basically, the indicator is defined by 3 different sub-indicators, and then all of these sub-indicators are disaggregated into the location. So is it the urban population, the rural population, or the total population? So when you will have a look later at the data, be aware of sub-indicators. For each sub-indicator, there is an abbreviation, which is called the series code, and the disaggregation levels. And I have already talked about the disaggregation levels. So this is under the pledge of the 2030 Agenda to leave no one behind. And this means that SDG indicators should be disaggregated where relevant by income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, disability status, and all these kind of things. But they are also disaggregated into non-demographic factors like waste treatment, type of product, other things. So what I put you here on the right is the not currently, but it's like last year, but indicators and SDGs, which had disaggregated indicators. And you can see it's a little bit spread, but actually almost all SDGs have some kind of disaggregation here and there, which is a starting point, but still needs to be updated currently. So what we have are 3 global SDG data provider. So everyone knows, obviously, it's the United Nations. Then we have the World Bank, and then we have which we call SDR, Sustainable Development Report. And this is from the Sustainable Development Solution Network and the Bertelsmann Stiftung. You can go to all of these 3 databases and have a look at the data. Download the data for either a country or an SDG, do a brief analysis or see how the structures of the data, and then that you share your impression or present maybe something you have found, the structure, and then that we can later reuse what you have found currently. So as I said, there are also data providers at different levels. So you have also national level, you have regional level, and local level. And I just put you here also 3 examples from Eurostat, which is a database especially for the European case. I put you the SDG Bolivia, which is actually about cities in Bolivia. And then I put you Nepal in data, which is specifically an SDG database for the Nepalese context. What you have seen now that you have all these kind of different options of data. So the question is now, if you want to do an analysis with SDGs, what data do you choose? It depends obviously on the research design you have, on the purpose of your analysis. So if you remember the steps of your analysis you have, it depends how the data quality is if you check for the different three options. And I've put here two examples for, again, the United and the Sustainable Development Report. And you can see for the United Nations that SDGs have different colors. And this means, or like not the SDGs, but the indicators have different colors. And this means actually and as an example for Nepal, and as one of your students has already pointed out, for example, SDG 14 is all red. And this is because for SDG 14, Nepal has no data. And then you see a few other cases where you have a lot of red. For SDG 3, we have a lot of green. And it is kind of, in the end, the coverage of data you have for the indicators, which is, as you can see, really varying across the SDGs. And the same will hold if you look at the data for Nepal for the SDR. So you really need to dive into the specific SDGs, the indicators, and the data quality to decide what data you choose. And the same obviously holds for what indicators you choose. So basically what I want to tell you is that whatever data you will be choosing, it will influence your understanding of your results. So we have done a brief analysis of all the three global data providers and checked for the same time period, which was 2000 to 2022. What do these global data providers have in terms of country coverage, goal coverage, target coverage, and so on? And you can see different amounts of countries covered for the UN, World Bank, and SDR. They have all 17 goals covered, but they have different targets covered, and they have different disaggregation levels. So basically, if you choose data, there are different impacts you need to be aware of. I listed them here. It's about the representativeness of the goal you have. So if database A has, 13 indicators and database B have 8 indicators, you need to check what is, better representative of SDG 1, for example. Then you have quality, scope, and relevance. Is there missing data? Are there bias or distortions in the data? And this is also sometimes needed for you to then look at the metadata and learn something about the quality. Choose, again, one SDG and one indicator specifically, and then try to find this specific indicator in one of the other two databases. So if you take an indicator on renewable or like greenhouse gas emissions, like see, do I find this greenhouse gas emission indicator also in the other two databases? And is it the same indicator? Try to plot, maybe. It would be nice if you plot the indicators from the different into one plot and see, are the values different? Are the values the same? Like, what's your impression, if you take one indicator, the same indicator actually from different databases, is there a difference? Is there not a difference? It's just something that I want you to be aware of when you want to do an analysis, that, not every database is comprehensive in all the ways holistically, but you need specifically to check for the purpose of your research design, the questions you have, the analysis you want to do. And also you see that the time series of your data is varying. Sometimes, an indicator is just measured every 2 years, or it's just measured every 5 years. And then the question is, how well can you do with an indicator that's just measured every 5 years, a statistical analysis? Because you will have a lot of biases and distortion in the statistical analysis. As I said, when working with data, you need to check the data quality. Is it useful for the purpose you have? And there are certain ways to improve data. You can merge data sets, for example. You can rebuild missing data by extrapolating or interpolating. You can standardize data, normalize data. You can deduplicate data. All these kind of things to verify and enrich your data, which is really needed if you want to go for, a statistical analysis.